Well, what we've just heard was not actually a string quartet or even a duet, it was a computer. And inside this computer is stored the sounds of a violin and cello. Computer musical instruments are now becoming very common in both popular music and classical music, and they're able to emulate, to copy sounds of real instruments and reproduce them at will in programmed music. A lot of people today are talking about synthesizer bands. In fact, it's a bit of a misnomer. These things are computers in the fullest sense of the word, and they're capable of reproducing music from almost any source. They can listen to the real world, they can listen to the most bizarre sounds, and allow people or musicians to use it to enhance their music, to broaden their palette of musical sounds to the point that allows them to do almost anything. I, for example, can speak into this microphone. Well, I can say almost anything, but for the sake of demonstration, we'll say hello, hello, and then using the program piece we've just heard, it will play it back with hello. Well, it doesn't sound a lot like music, but I think it gives you an example of what I'm talking about. The instrument is capable of reproducing almost anything an artist wants to do. It can record every possible sound that's in the real world, and more artists are using it today to make hit records, to make unusual sounds, and to create things that were never possible before.
For me, it's something of a dream machine, and I always fantasized about something which you could take any real-world sound and manipulate it and put it in your music. I mean, one's always had the possibility of doing that with tape, but it's a tremendously long-winded effect. And I think the effect of fatigue and boredom are much underrated in studios and in rock music particularly, because once you get irritated, or you know that it's going to take too long, or you can't afford the studio time, certain things become beyond your limits.
What you're saying is then that it's put much more emphasis upon the imagination rather than technical ability.
Yeah, I think that the thoughts and the ideas are becoming much more critical than the technique, which is to say also that the technique will never be superseded. I mean, someone's long-term relationship with an instrument will produce a type of performance, personality, that you will not reproduce with any amount of computers, synthesizers, whatever. But the juice, the meat of the sounds of those things will become accessible to virtually anyone who really wants access.
I disagree a little bit with that. The great performers, people like Yehudi Menuhin and so on, of course, will never be replaced, because that's part of why they're great, because they can actually make an instrument speak, become part of themselves. But so much music is formula stuff. I mean, everything from pit musicians to, you know, is this a dog food jingle we're doing? It's formula over and over again. And of course, once it's repetitious, a computer is perfect to do that.
Sure.
It just does the same thing over and over again. I mean, drum sounds. It's a great example. Over the years, I've worked in various studios, and we've spent hours, you've probably spent hours trying to get the right drum sound. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, the drum part is fairly ordinary that you use, because you might be producing or trying to produce a record aimed at the charts rather than this particular piece of music. And the drum sound is then a formula sound. Whereas today you can get a drumulator, or you can get a Linn drum, or any number now of computer drum machines, which, as Peter said, are getting cheaper and cheaper, and you can get a great sound first time. So what happens to the poor drummer? Particularly the session drummer. I mean, session drummers were prized for their ability to turn up and be reliable and get a good sound, and so many of them now are out of work, aren't they?
How badly has it affected unemployment amongst musicians then?
I feel sorry for someone who spent 10 years learning an instrument to have a computer turn up and do it, but at the same time, if what they're doing is repetitious and uninspired, and I think probably you've had an example of session women who are clock watchers, you know, or when's this session over, what a drag, they don't even know what they're playing on. Those sort of people are being hit. And I feel on one hand sorry for them that they're losing work, and on the other hand, I think perhaps they almost deserve to for some of their attitudes I've held in the past.
Yeah, I wouldn't look upon it so much as a punishment, but I think the same thing's happening in, you know, throughout society, and that repetitious mechanical jobs are being replaced because they can be done more efficiently and more cheaply by the machines. And so I think the good part of that is it will force people to use and develop parts of their personalities and their thought processes that separate them from machines. And that says more instinctive things, more intuitive work, more creative work. And I think that'll be beneficial in the long run. But there's going to be this Luddite period when people will fight to hang on to jobs when machines are going to be capable of doing their work better than they can.
10 years from now, what do you think will be the situation?
For anyone that wants to work with sound, it's going to provide that huge range that nothing else can. And for people with ideas, that's very exciting. I mean, I think one of the great things about rock is that it's had this myth, which is partly based in fact, that on Monday you can decide to be a rock star and on Friday you can have a record in the charts. As against a lot of other art forms where you need to work slavishly hard for many years. And I think that's a great strength, that you don't need to be very good to be successful in rock. And I mean, I like that. And there are still things that you will learn and craft to be learned, but you can get to the meat quickly.
But, you know, I can imagine a lot of people listening to our conversation right now saying, well, that's cheating.
It's cheating, if you like, for somebody who can't play an instrument to be able to press a button and the instrument plays. But who's going to make up the melodies? Who's going to make up the lyrics? Who's going to sing?
And unless you've got something to say, you can throw away all the technology. I mean, it's still the feel and the message and the content that is going to determine whether a thing has long-term life.
You're bound to have the odd act who presses the button and makes the sound and it's a hit. But whether they can come up with an interesting track for the second or the third or the fourth is an entirely different matter, and that's really where the crunch comes.